African class. My name is Thomas Siegel, and I'm going to do a speech on eugenics in America. Brief history. Imagine, if you would, a world where the very course of human evolution is not driven by nature, but instead guided by the ever-reaching hands of human science, capable of cultivating those traits deemed most desirable: intelligence, good health, physical attractiveness, with the ability to weed out and systematically eradicate all undesirable characteristics: poverty, promiscuity, addiction, thereby allowing society to flourish. Such a novel concept was the driving force behind the early 20th century movement known as eugenics, a form of pseudoscience that captivated the world and gave birth to some of its worst atrocities. Today, it is my goal to share with you a brief history on the rise, fall, and reemergence of eugenics and the role that America played in its vilification. The term eugenics, which is derived from the Greek word eugenes, meaning good in birth or good in stock, was first coined in 1883 by Sir Francis Galton. His definition of eugenics was the study of agencies under social control that may improve or impair the racial qualities of future generations, either physically or mentally. This statement reflected his belief in the improvement of human hereditary traits through selective breeding and social policies. Galton's vision of eugenics focused on encouraging the reproduction of individuals with desirable traits while discouraging or preventing the reproduction of those deemed undesirable. In other words, positive eugenics involves promoting the reproduction of individuals with desirable traits, such as intelligence, physical fitness, and morality, to enhance the overall genetic quality of the population. While negative eugenics, on the other hand, focuses more on the preventing of the reproduction of individuals considered genetically inferior or undesirable, typically through methods such as sterilization, segregation, or even euthanasia. In fact, 5 years after Galton's book posited that human traits could be transferred from one generation to the next, an American named Richard Dugdale set out to prove that negative traits could be similarly transferred within families. According to Mira Markfield, in her article, A More Perfect Union, Eugenics in America, she states that Dugdale studied criminals, vagrants, and paupers, people to whose records he, as the head of the New York Prison Association, had easy access. He documented the lives of dozens of families, eventually concluding that more than 700 of these individuals shared a common ancestor he designated Margaret, mother of criminals. He called Margaret's descendants the Jukes. In 1877, he published The Jukes, a study in crime, pauperism, disease, and hereditary. It is difficult to overstate the impact of Dugdale's work in American reformist circles. His book quickly became a touchstone for anyone trying to prove that negative human tendencies were the result of nature, not nurture. According to Frank Victor, his essay titled Race Culture, Recent Perspectives on the History of Eugenics, he claims that eugenics gave scientific authority to social fears and moral panics, lent respectability to racial doctrines, and provided legitimacy to sterilization acts and immigration laws. He also stated that eugenics promoted a more biologizing version of society in which the reproductive rights of individuals were subordinated to the rights of an abstract, organic collectivity. These undesirable class of people were lovingly dubbed imbeciles or morons by the ruling class and sentimental institutions, where the alleged cost of institutional care was increasingly invoked to justify sterilization. Indiana became the first state to pass a eugenic sterilization law. While the idea of therapeutic sterilization enjoyed broad support in the state's medical community, Dr. Harry C. Sharp of the Indiana Reformatory was particularly instrumental in demonstrating the usefulness of sterilization. Sharp, who declined to administer anesthesia to his patients, claimed to have performed vasectomies on hundreds of male inmates for the purpose of producing mental and physical improvement, as well as for the prevention of procreation. In the light of Sharp's success, other states soon adopted similar measures. In 1909, California adopted the broadest eugenic sterilization law in the country. It effectively allowed the heads of state institutions e.g. prisons, hospitals, homes for children, to decide which of their charges to surgically asexualize. Connecticut took up a similar law. Eventually, 32 states legalized involuntary sterilization for certain population groups. Around this time in 1927, the United States Supreme Court made a bombshell ruling. In Buck versus Bell, the court approved the forced sterilization under Virginia's Euthanagical Sterilization Act of Carrie Buck, a feeble-minded white woman who was the daughter of a feeble-minded mother and the mother of an illegitimate feeble-minded child. Speaking for 8 members of the court, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. wrote that it is better for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offsprings for crimes or let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Carrie Buck was branded promiscuous and an imbecile after an incestuous rape left her pregnant, with her daughter being branded an imbecile only 6 months after her birth. Daniel Frost delves deeper into this fascinating case in his book, Protection Against Eugenics, a comparison of 2 jurisprudences. This culmination of eugenic ideology and legal precedents paved the way for the enactment of the American Sterilization Act, which authorized the involuntary sterilization of individuals deemed fit for reproduction on a federal scale. This dark chapter in American history saw thousands of individuals, primarily those deemed mentally ill or intellectually disabled, subjected to involuntary sterilization under the guise of promoting genetic purity and social progress. The practices of eugenics in America were so predominant that it caused members of Nazi Germany to marvel and take note. Adolf Hitler was once quoted as saying, "Now that we know the laws of heredity, it is mostly possible to prevent unhealthy and severely handicapped beings from coming into the world. I have studied with great interest the laws of several American states concerning the prevention of reproduction by people whose progeny would, in all probability, be of no value or injurious to the racial stock. The possibility of excess and error is still no proof of the incorrectness of these laws. It only exhorts us to the greatest possible conscientiousness." He then went on to use the eugenics he learned from the Americans to systematically sterilize and eventually kill millions of people. This act of genocide marked the fall of eugenics from the public forum, igniting intense debates about the applications of certain eugenic practices. Here we have a Nazi parade in America prior to World War II, and a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden, February 20th, 1939. In conclusion, this brief history of eugenics in America barely scratches the surface of the effects that this theory has had on the public. From Western racism to Eastern communism, eugenics has made its presence known. Although it is relatively looked upon with suspicion, advancements in the field of genetic editing, or gene editing and genetic mapping, mean that eugenics is here to stay. But like the late philosopher George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Hopefully, as the human race steps into the 4th industrial revolution, biotechnology, we can remember the lessons of the previous generations and move forward as a society in a healthy and inclusive manner. Thank you.